what's a good process for planning before a match? I mean, a lot of players, I think they just end up, showing up on the court and then trying to problem solve later on if they do at all. So what are some tips for us to properly prepare for our matches?
I think the biggest tip that I give to my players when they go into play is just to focus on the tennis. I mean, there's a lot of times players go in and they really worry about winning or losing. Really, I think that affects everybody. They think they get a first round, they got to win the first round, or they've got to beat this player to get a UTR, and they stop focusing on what they need to do to win, and we should have a good performance and play good tennis. And I found that using visualization and thinking about the strategies and having a plan, and whether you write that plan down. I have a lot of my players actually go in with a notepad and pen, or they have a written guide, and these are the things that you're going to work on, and these are the things you're going to try and execute, and you're going to do your best to do that. And if you lose, that's fine. But it's very hard, especially with junior tennis, because I think kids feel so bad when they lose, that they sometimes just, that's what they focus on, is that they don't want to lose, or they need to win. But I think that's really probably the biggest tip, is to really focus on the tennis. What type of tennis do you want to play? Go out and try and play that tennis. So you shouldn't be happy coming off the court if you just spent 2 hours moonballing your opponent to death. Maybe it would have been better to lose that match going for your shots, and maybe you're better for the next match for that, because if you spend 3-4 years moonballing your opponents to death, that's 3-4 years wasted where you could have been developing.
Yeah, love a lot pretty much all of what you said there, and kind of reminded me of my junior days. I mean, I remember in particular, like just when I played certain players, like thinking about too many superfluous things, like, oh, like if I lose, and they're gonna talk about me, and like I've always beaten this player, and I'll they'll make fun of me or whatever.
Yeah.
And then also I remember also in college where I was up 6-2 5-1 in a Cornell Invitational, and it was my very first college match, and I was thinking, oh wow, it's gonna be great to win, and then obviously I choked and lost.
And that's what happens to players, right? That's why players they get up in the score, they get match point, and they think, oh, I'm at the finish line, and they stop actually focusing on, okay, where's this serve going? Where's this return going? Where am I going to hit the next ball? But because if you focus on those details, the winning will take care of itself, and it gives you the best chance to win. So it's very hard because, as tennis players, we have to be very aware of the score. But we also can't be so frozen by the score that we don't play our game. So that's what's really interesting about tennis. It always makes it interesting.
Yeah, and it's so funny too, because a lot of us, like, it's even just like USTA league matches or whatever, that we're like going crazy and getting nervous, and then you think about the professionals that they have, points on the line and hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, and they're able to focus, like you said. It's pretty amazing.
I think that also comes into to the way that amateurs and the way that pros think of points is so different also. I mean, pros understand when they can take more risk based on the score. I think most amateurs probably play every point very, very similar. I also think that pros they always think of two balls. They always think of the ball they're hitting, and they always think of the next ball. And amateurs, especially if you go down to 3-5, 4-0 doubles leagues, a lot of times they're thinking about just making the ball they're hitting, and that's it. And you'll have these long extended rallies where nobody's poaching. If it's doubles, nobody's coming to the net. And it's almost like a badge of honor. I played a 4-hour doubles match today, and it's like, no, that just means you're in a pillow fight, basically.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, like I was at a sectionals tournament last year, and I was seeing these 3-0 maybe the women's player, not knocking on any particular division or anything, but it was just like the two baseliners were just hitting back and forth. The two net players were just watching, and as a coach,
just not willing to take any risk. That's you have to take some risk, and if you allow the scoreboard to dictate when you take that risk, then it frees you up as well, because you have to understand that 30 love, when you're up 30 love, it's definitely different to when you're down 30 love. So you can't play every point the same. And if you and your partner, if you're a doubles player, if you and your partner talk about that, then you can sort of strategize and play better tennis.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joel. And speaking of that, and again, obviously I'm not trying to act like I'm an amazing player. Like I struggle sometimes on, the back end volley in particular. And so you mentioned how like we should be able to absorb pace as a volleyer. And so I'm curious about, volleys in general, like some general tips that you can give us so that we can, hit better volleys. Because when you watch the pros, and even yourself as well, you make it seem so easy when you're volleying. So I'm curious if you could kind of enlighten us as to maybe a few keys that commonly maybe amateur players make technical mistakes on.
A lot of players don't use their offhand very well on most strokes, but especially on the backhand, it really helps to turn the shoulders. There's sort of three types of volleys. There's a wall volley where you're just using the pace of your opponent's ball. Mm-hmm. That's really common in doubles. The baseline player rips it at you, and you just basically become a wall and deflect it back at his opponent. His partner. There's also a cut volley where you're at the service line approaching. You've got to keep the ball nice and low, so you've got to apply some backspin to that ball and keep it skidding through the court. And then there's the catch volley where you're taking pace off the volley. And that's where you're trying to keep the racket head up and come around the ball and sort of angle off by using the opponent's pace. So there's sort of three main volleys there, and you've got to be proficient at using all of those. But I definitely think that using spin and being able to use the ball's force that's coming at you is very important. Leading with the edge is something that I get my players to do a lot when they go for their volleys. Not leading with a square racket face, so that would be a wall volley. But if I need to angle it or I need to take some pace off the ball, then I'll lead with the edge, that front edge. So if you're in a ready position, that edge that's pointing at the net, that's going to lead. And if you can get your feet to the ball as well, you'll be able to absorb some pace and find some angle. And that's a huge volley for singles, but also for doubles.
Gotcha, Joel. That's great stuff. With the volley, is there any other acceptable grip than the continental? Like, do you have any players who they have like an Eastern or something like that, and you just say, you know what, this looks fine? Or do you always have them use the continental?
Yeah, look, it depends if it's a problem or not. I definitely have some of the ladies that I coach that will use a different grip on volleying, but they can do it fairly well. So, it depends on their level and their aspirations, but why would we change something that they can do well? And I think we don't need to change everything if it's working. Ideally, you would be in one grip for half volleys, overheads, anything up at the net in the front of the court. But if you happen to be able to do something very well and you don't need to change that, and you don't have aspirations to play at a very high level, then I think that's okay. But it really depends on your goals and the level of competition. Because as you know, you're not really going to get away with volleying like with a forehand grip if you're playing super high level, but maybe you will at a certain level of doubles or social tennis.
Yeah, that's a great point to kind of define your goals.